Welcome to Chapter 6, Dimensions of Nation-State Cultures. How do you describe your culture when asked? I mean, I know that most people don't walk up to me and say, tell me about your culture, but if asked, American, Southern, I mean, these are things I could say. American, Southern, Texan, baby boomer, soldier, parent, grandparent, army brat. I could use all kinds of different words to describe the different cultures that I belong to. And most people use nationality somewhere in the mix. So Hofstede research developed in the 60s and 70s. I know that's long before your time, and you probably consider it ancient. I was born in 1960, so it is ancient, all right? But he basically studied IBM employees from 40 different countries. And he came up with what he thought was 4 dimensions of cultural, unique identifying things. And the text lists them and then lists them in other research, and then it goes through stuff in depth. I'm basically going to tell you a little bit about each one instead of following the book and mentioning them and mentioning them again and again. His first one was individualism versus collectivism. We spoke a little bit about that in other chapters. Individualistic societies, cultures express self-direction and control. United States. It's all about you. Collectivistic cultures emphasize the group. What's best for the group? Masculinity and femininity. He caught a lot of flack about this more recently because, to be honest, back in the 60s and 70s, masculinity and femininity meant completely, well, I won't say completely different things, but they meant different than they do now. But according to him, masculine cultures strive for distinction between genders. When I was in Kyrgyzstan, women were second-class citizens. Most of our interpreters were women, and they could they relished the point where I got upset with somebody and wanted to yell at them because they could get away with yelling at this man in power because she was speaking for me. Femininity, on the other hand, describes cultures that have less of a difference between masculine and feminine roles. Power distance is the extent that the less powerful accept the power differences. Some countries, some countries, when somebody's in power, they're untouchable. They're royalty. They're this. In other countries, not so much. Uncertainty avoidance, the extent people feel threatened by uncertainty. Many cultures rely on traditions and rules to follow. And when people don't follow those rules, it causes uncertainty. And how much do you want to avoid it? Hofstede and Bond added Confucian, or otherwise known as long-term versus short-term orientation. Long-term is persistence of traditions and order. How much does the group, the culture, believe traditions and order should be followed? And short-term values with persistence, how much, we need to worry about it, but it's not that important. Hofstede and Minkov later added indulgence versus self-restraint. How much do we try to keep up with the Joneses, as the saying goes? How much do we indulge in, well, I want this, so I'm going to get it? Whereas self-restraint is about saving and putting off for the future. I really want this, but I can't have it right now. And, I think all of us lean a little one way or the other depending upon what it is. I indulge in some very good scotch because that's what I enjoy. I am being self-restraint about buying a new tractor. I want to do it before I can't drive at all, but on the other hand, it's a big purchase. So it's something that I have to worry about. The criticisms of Hofstede, it's really difficult to consider a nation a nation's not the best unit to study. It's especially diverse nations, like the United States. If you know people of different cultures in the United States, for example, different religions, they express a lot of different things as it being important. Well, the nation is made up of all these different groups. It was also complained about a small survey sample, and it's old and outdated. And the other thing he did was he got his subjects from subsidiaries of IBM, one company. So there was a company culture involved in this as well. So it affected the overall outcome of his study. Trompenaires in Hampton Turner, they did another study, and they had 46,000 managers in 40 countries. And they came up with their own dimensions. Universalist versus particularism. Universalists prefer laws and rules. Things follow when we're flowing rules, and the particularists, it's like, yeah, they follow beating their own drum. I served 20 years in the Army. The Army was a very universalist culture. When you didn't follow their standards, you marched the beat of your own drum, more often than not, you didn't stay in the Army very long. Have any of y'all ever seen MASH? Klinger was a particularist. He didn't want to stay in the Army. Individualism versus communitarianism. Individualists take care of themselves. Communitarianism, the group is the most important. Specific versus diffused. Specific personnel and personal and business don't mix. Yeah, I've been a member of many different organizations, and some of them, my personal life overlapped with my business life, and others it didn't. The diffuse is the overlapping of personal and business lives. I'm sure many of you have been in situations where there's some coworkers you got along with and others you didn't. So therefore, to me, this specific versus diffused, I know that they're trying to look at the overall culture, but in my opinion, interpersonally, I think we do both of those often. Neutral versus emotional. Neutral is a control over emotions. You don't get excited. You don't lash out. Long before your time, there was basically 3 news anchors, and they would read the news. No emotion involved. So you didn't know if they were a Democrat or Republican. You didn't know if they were pro-life or not. They read the news. Emotional, spontaneous expressions are accepted. A lot of cultures are like that. A lot of cultures do not expect you to express your emotions publicly. So achievement versus ascription. Well, what does that mean? Achievement is you are what you do. These achievements I have made, they created me, I created them. Ascription is title influences how others see you. Others see you. How do you see a police officer? You don't know the person. You don't know what their achievements are, but they have that uniform on, and you see them in a certain way. Sequential versus synchronous. Sequential, they value timelessness or timeliness. If, I'm an old soldier. That makes me a sequential person in many aspects. I want to be on time. When we say we're going to meet at a certain time, I want to do it. One of the things that drives me crazy is often my kids will say, well, I'll be over tomorrow morning and I'll help you with that. My morning begins about 4 or 5 in the morning. I get up, work out, take a shower, eat breakfast, have coffee. So by 6, 7 o'clock, at the latest, I'm ready to go do what we need to do. My kids, on the other hand, tomorrow morning is sometime before noon. Synchronous groups, cultures, multitask, and time is flexible. I think I gave you the example already about when I was in Peru and a guy said, "Mañana, tomorrow morning we'll take care of this." Well, his idea of morning was way different than mine. Internal versus outer direction. Something else this is often referred to as internal and external locus. Internal is control. I can control things. External is things are controlled out beyond me. I can't control, the weather. That's external, that's outer. But I can control what I do. Happiness. The book has a small paragraph about happiness. And what makes you happy as a cultural group. And once again, that depends on many of the subcultures that you may be part of. If you are a very religious person, seeing a religious statement that supports your belief could make you happy. If you are a parent or grandparent, seeing your grandkids can make you happy. But they did these studies to find out who was the happiest country. Environmental sustainability. Cultures often reflect their environment. When I was in Germany, it was, especially the first time, it was a very clean place. People did not litter. The last time I was there, it wasn't quite that way. The culture had changed. But the performance orientation is how much does the society reward group members for being environmentally sustainable? And in Germany, we had recycling bins for glass. There was a green one, a brown one, and a clear one. And you were supposed to sort your glass along with your other trash. Well, this one military community didn't do a very good job of it, so the Germans quit picking up the trash. They would come there and they would make you sort your trash in front of them. And until people started doing it regularly, they didn't do the regular pickups anymore. Assertiveness orientation is the degree members are assertive and confrontational. And, it depends on the community, especially in the United States you live in, as to whether or not people are assertive about and confrontational about people being environmental. The future-oriented is the degree members engage in future behaviors. How much do you do for your children, your grandchildren, their grandchildren, their children, further down the line? How much does your importance does your culture place on making the future a better place for them? Humane orientation is rewards. How much does the group reward the individual for being humane and kind? The collectivism 1 is the degree of the collective distribution is rewarded. How much do we reward the group for collective distribution of stuff? Collectivism 2 is the degree individuals express pride and loyalty in their organization. I've always been proud of being a soldier. And I even was nearing retirement, and I went into a place, I had my uniform on, and this Marine was in there, and he said, "Master Sergeant." And I said, "Not for long, I'm going to retire." He said, "No, you'll always be a Master Sergeant." And in many ways, it's true. I still carry a lot of that with me. It's been 20 years since I've been in the Army. Today, when I was at Rotary, that's why I'm dressed up, by the way, I was supposed to introduce our soldier guest. So somebody said, "Are you going to be there on time?" Because there was a question as to whether or not I'd make it. I had some minor surgery last week. And I said, old soldier knows that if you're on time, you're late. So I'm proud that I have that internal fortitude, that way that the military developed me. Gender egalitarianism, the extent society minimizes gender differences. There are some societies that separate the two. What came to mind when I read this was my wife loves watching those judge shows. When she was watching Divorce Court, and this guy said, well, I'm an old-fashioned guy, and she's supposed to do the housework and all. The judge said, does she have a job outside the house? He said, yeah. She said, well, shouldn't you be doing that? And if you want her to do nothing but housework, if you want to say you're an old-fashioned guy, maybe, just maybe, she shouldn't have to work. But since she does have to work, shouldn't you both be doing the inside stuff? Power distance, the degree society expects power to be unequally shared. How much does your society that you're in, how much does your culture, the group that you're in, expect people to be more powerful than other people? Many people say a marriage is 50-50. Other people say the man is the head of the household. Well, you can't have it both ways. If you're going to share things equally, then you need to share the power equally. In uncertainty avoidance, the extent that members avoid uncertainty. We discussed that a couple of times already. The book further goes into different studies about places. Singapore. I'm not going to go over that one. It's a very short one. But Japan is a homogeneous culture. This one I read with great interest, although I've never been to Japan. I would love to go. But it went into the history and such. And Japan was isolated because it was an island nation for so many years that their culture developed a certain way without outside influences. Rice was important to everybody. The emperor was the emperor, and you didn't change that. And now it's starting to change things. For example, and basically in Japan, there's two cultures, Japanese and others. They don't really look at, like we have Asian Americans and Latin Americans and Irish Americans and African Americans. We have all these different subcultures, but to them, it's Japanese and other. Many of the things in Japan are becoming westernized. Many of the words that are leaking in there are becoming Western words. Younger generations are seen as selfish and non-traditional. We see a lot of that in the United States as well. When I was young, the teenagers in the 50s and the 60s they had no respect for tradition, and they were selfish. And now they're older, and they're saying the same thing about the next generation. And Japan is finally recognizing that it's not as homogeneous as they thought. It's not as Japanese. One thing about the Japanese culture, and it's been expressed in this book a couple of times, Koreans that were brought there basically during World War II and had children and had children and had children, those Koreans are not recognized as Japanese, although they have spent their life there. They have spent generations there, but they still aren't Japanese. So that's a quick thing on chapter 6. I hope it's helpful. Read the text, watch the video, answer the discussion, and I will see you next week.